The brilliant white beam carved through the Pacific darkness, hunting. That Japanese destroyer searchlight passed so close to our position I could have reached out and touched the light itself. We froze there in the blackness near Vela Lavella, 23 Americans aboard PT164, our engines throttled down to nothing, hearts hammering against our ribs. Beyond that prowling warship, 3 fat transports lumbered through the strait, their holds packed with nearly 8,000 enemy troops bound for Colombangara. Those soldiers had no idea their voyage was about to end in these dark waters. July 19th, 1943. In less than 5 minutes, we'd show the Imperial Japanese Navy why the night was no longer theirs. My fingers ached from gripping the twin 50 caliber machine guns. Next to me, Ensign Robert Vanderberg, we called him Dutch, whispered coordinates to our commander, Lieutenant Arthur McFerson. The compass glowed faintly green, the only illumination we permitted ourselves. 2 more boats lurked behind us, PT168 and PT171, hidden where the moonlight couldn't reach them in the shadow of the volcanic peaks. We represented something new in naval warfare, something the Japanese hadn't anticipated, and they were about to learn what that meant. I'm Chief Petty Officer Thomas Harrigan, United States Navy Reserve. I was among the first to demonstrate that wooden vessels could send steel warships to the bottom. When people ask what it felt like to be part of such a closely guarded operation in 1943, I tell them we were too focused on survival to think about history. Our only concern was stopping those 8,000 Japanese soldiers from reaching Colombangara, where they'd kill American boys trying to capture that strategic airfield. Each torpedo we loaded represented hundreds of lives we might save. Every enemy ship we destroyed meant families back home spared the telegram from the War Department. Understanding how 3 vessels barely larger than pleasure craft could challenge the Imperial Japanese Navy at its zenith requires understanding what we faced that summer of 1943. The Japanese had perfected nocturnal combat. After their crushing victory at Savo Island the previous August, when they obliterated 4 Allied cruisers without losing a single ship, they dominated the darkness throughout the Solomon Islands. Their crews trained for years in night operations, mastering combat without radar through sharp eyesight and drilled coordination. They called their nighttime supply runs the Tokyo Express. We had another name for them, the Rat Run. Either way, they moved men and materiel with virtual immunity once darkness fell. The American Navy possessed larger vessels, superior radar technology, and greater firepower. Yet, we were losing the war after dark. Our admirals, schooled in the traditional battle-line tactics of Jutland and Manila Bay, struggled to adapt to this new form of warfare. Our cruisers and destroyers, built for fleet engagements in open water, became vulnerable targets in the restricted waters of the Solomons. We needed something different, something unexpected. That something was being constructed in secret shipyards from New Orleans to New York, and it would transform naval combat forever. The PT boat, Patrol Torpedo Boat, emerged from desperation and American resourcefulness. 80 feet long, 20 feet wide, built from laminated mahogany plywood instead of steel. 3 Packard V-12 engines, modified versions of Liberty aircraft engines, propelled them past 45 knots, faster than any destroyer or conventional warship afloat. We carried 4 21-inch torpedo tubes loaded with Mark 13 torpedoes, 1 20mm Oerlikon cannon, 4 50 caliber machine guns, and sufficient ammunition for roughly 15 minutes of continuous fighting. After that, we'd better be racing home or sinking. I first encountered a PT boat in February 1943 at the Motor Torpedo Boat Training Facility in Melville, Rhode Island. I'd been serving on destroyers, fresh from convoy escort duty in the North Atlantic, when the Navy requested volunteers for hazardous assignment with experimental craft. The recruiter refused to describe these vessels, only mentioning the anticipated casualty rate exceeded 50%. From 200 volunteers, they selected 40. I qualified because I could navigate by celestial observation and had small boat experience from my youth on Chesapeake Bay. The first time I stepped onto PT-164, I questioned the Navy's sanity. This wasn't a warship. This was an overgrown speedboat with delusions of adequacy. The hull was wooden,
Wood in a conflict of steel and armor plating. The living quarters were so confined that hot bunking was not just common, it was mandatory. We had no armor protection except sheet metal around the bridge area. One solid hit from anything larger than small arms fire, and we'd become kindling floating on the waves. Then I met Mac, and everything shifted. Mac was 28, practically ancient by PT boat standards, with eyes that had witnessed too much already. He'd been at Pearl Harbor on the destroyer USS Shaw when the Japanese attacked, fought at Midway, and volunteered for PT boats because, as he put it, he was tired of being a target and wanted to become the predator. Mac understood something it would take us weeks to grasp. PT boats weren't designed to fight like conventional warships. We were maritime guerrillas, seagoing assassins who struck from ambush and vanished before the enemy could respond. Our crew represented a collection of misfits and specialists who would never have served together on a standard Navy ship. Dutch Vanderberg, our executive officer, was a Yale mathematics professor who could calculate torpedo firing solutions mentally faster than most men could manipulate a slide rule. Chief motor machinist mate Carlos Mendoza, we called him Charlie, had been building racing engines in Los Angeles before the war and could make our temperamental Packards purr or roar depending on our needs. Radioman Second Class William Patterson, nicknamed Sparks, came from the submarine service where he'd learned to operate communications equipment in complete silence. Our torpedoman, gunner's mate First Class Patrick O'Brien, Patty to everyone, was an artist with those mechanical fish. Each Mark 13 torpedo weighed 2,200 pounds and cost as much as a house back home. He maintained them better than most men treated their wives, constantly adjusting, cleaning, and talking to them. He'd polish the bronze propellers and say, "These beauties are the only reason the Japanese will respect us. One shot, one kill, or we're just expensive target practice." The remaining 12-man crew included additional gunners, an engineer, a cook who served as medic, and 3 seamen handling everything else. We were black and white, urban and rural, high school dropouts and college graduates, united by one simple reality. We were all volunteers who'd enlisted knowing we probably wouldn't survive the war. Training at Melville was merciless and unforgiving. The Navy had learned from early PT boat casualties that enthusiasm alone wasn't sufficient. We needed to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than anything the Japanese could deploy. We practiced high-speed attacks until we could launch torpedoes accurately while bouncing across waves at 40 knots. We learned to navigate by sound and instinct when tropical storms reduced visibility to nothing. Most critically, we learned to think like pirates rather than sailors. Commander James Patterson, Wild Jim to everyone, ran the training program. He'd survived the Philippines campaign and escaped Corregidor on one of the last PT boats out. His training philosophy was simple. The Japanese expect you to fight fairly. Don't. They expect you to follow naval tradition. Don't. They expect you to fear the dark. Make them fear it instead. He taught us that our greatest weapons weren't our torpedoes, but surprise, velocity, and pure audacity. We arrived at our forward base at Rendova on June 30th, 1943, as the New Georgia invasion commenced. The base consisted of little more than a fuel depot, some camouflaged Quonset huts, and a crude dock hidden beneath palm fronds. The first thing we noticed was the smell. Decaying vegetation, diesel fumes, and the sweet stench of tropical rot. The second was artillery fire from New Georgia, where Marines were dying to capture Munda Airfield.
Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 9, our unit, consisted of 12 PT boats tasked with interdicting Japanese reinforcement attempts throughout the Central Solomons. Our mission sounded straightforward: patrol the waters between major Japanese bases and sink anything flying the rising sun. The reality proved far more complex. These waters formed a maze of coral reefs, volcanic islands, and hidden Japanese strongpoints. The enemy had seaplanes for reconnaissance, coast watchers on every major island, and destroyer squadrons specifically trained to hunt PT boats. Our first patrol on July 5th ended in disaster. 3 boats, including ours, attempted intercepting a Japanese convoy near Visu Visu. We were spotted by an enemy float plane before reaching attack position, and suddenly 4 destroyers bore down on us with searchlights blazing and guns firing. We scattered like startled rabbits, racing through a gauntlet of shell splashes.
PT158 took a direct hit from a 5-inch shell and disintegrated. 12 men gone instantly, vaporized, along with their boat. We spent 4 hours dodging through reefs and islands before finally escaping. No torpedoes fired, no enemy ships damaged, and we'd lost a boat and crew. That night, gathered at our Rendova base, Mac assembled us. "We learned something crucial today," he said quietly. "We can't fight them like destroyers fight each other. We're not built for gun battles. We strike from ambush or we don't strike at all." It was a harsh lesson, purchased with blood, but it would shape every mission afterward. Over the following 2 weeks, we developed new tactics through trial and error. We learned to use Kylan radar shadows to mask our approach. We discovered that shutting down 2 engines and running on 1 dramatically reduced our acoustic signature. Most importantly, we figured out how to coordinate attacks between multiple boats using simple light signals the Japanese couldn't intercept. The intelligence network supporting us was extraordinary. Australian coast watchers hiding in hills on Japanese-occupied islands would radio enemy ship movements. Native Solomon Islanders risking execution if discovered would paddle their canoes out to meet us with information about Japanese positions. Sometimes we'd receive decrypted intelligence from Pearl Harbor providing exact convoy schedules, but usually we hunted by instinct and experience. PT boats remained classified as secret weapons in July 1943. Official Navy communications never mentioned us by designation, referring only to small craft or mosquito boats. The Japanese knew something was hitting their convoys, but their initial reports described us as submarines or mines. They couldn't believe Americans would send wooden speedboats against steel warships. That ignorance was our greatest advantage. On the night of July 18th, Coast Watcher reporting indicated a major Japanese reinforcement convoy would transit through Blackness Strait, heading for Vela on Colombangara. This was the target we'd been waiting for. Multiple transports with minimal escort, forced to navigate narrow waters where their superior numbers wouldn't help them. Mac volunteered our boat to lead the attack. Alongside PT168, skippered by Lieutenant Henry Bramwell, we called him Hank, and PT171 under Lieutenant Junior Grade Joseph Antonelli, Joey to everyone. The briefing that evening was tense. Intelligence estimated 3 large transports escorted by 1 to 2 destroyers bearing elements of the Japanese 13th Regiment, elite troops who'd fought in China and the Philippines. These weren't construction battalions or supply troops. These were frontline soldiers who would make our Marines' lives miserable on New Georgia. Commander William Specht, our squadron leader, made it clear. "Gentlemen, this convoy cannot reach Vela. I don't care if you have to ram those transports. They go to the bottom tonight." As the sun set on July 19th, painting the sky blood red over the Solomons, we made final preparations. Paddy O'Brien ran through his torpedo checklist for the 5th time, setting the Mark 13s for 10-foot depth and 28-knot speed, optimal settings for hitting a loaded transport. Charlie Mendoza had our engines tuned to perfection, mufflers installed to reduce noise. Dutch Vanderberg plotted and replotted our attack approach, calculating currents, wind, and lunar position. I checked my machine guns one final time, ensuring ammunition belts fed smoothly. We loaded nothing but armor-piercing and incendiary rounds. Regular ball ammunition was useless against steel ships, but API rounds could penetrate bridge windows, start fires, and suppress enemy gun crews. Every 5th round was tracer, creating lines of fire that looked like deadly fireworks in the night sky. At 20-30 hours, we slipped our moorings and headed into gathering darkness. The 3 boats moved in column formation, muffling their engines to a low rumble. As we cleared Rendova Harbor, Mac ordered weapons test. The night erupted briefly in gunfire as 12 machine guns and 3 20mm cannons barked into empty sea. Then silence again, broken only by rhythmic pulse of our engines and hiss of water along our hulls. The ocean was rougher than hoped, with 2-foot chop that would make torpedo accuracy challenging, but it also meant our wakes would be harder to spot and wave action would mask engine noise. Every advantage mattered when you were 80 feet of plywood attacking 400 feet of steel. By 2300 hours, we reached our ambush position off the north coast of Vela Lavella. Mac cut engines to idle and we drifted in darkness, waiting. The only sounds were water lapping against our hull and distant rumble of artillery from New Georgia. Then at 2347 hours, Sparks Patterson picked up a transmission from Coast Watcher. 3 large ships, 2 escorts bearing 280, speed 18 knots, range 15 miles from your position. The hunt was on. Mac started 2 engines, keeping them at low throttle as we moved to attack. The mathematics were simple but crucial. The
The enemy convoy was making 18 knots on steady course. We could make 35 knots without creating excessive wake. If we positioned ourselves correctly, we'd intercept them just as they entered the narrowest part of Blackett Strait, where they'd have no room to maneuver. At 0018 hours on July 20th, Dutch spotted them through binoculars, dark shapes against the starfield, exactly where they should be. The Japanese maintained perfect formation, 2 destroyers in the lead, 3 transports following with another destroyer bringing up the rear. They showed no lights, but their size and regular spacing made them easy to track once you knew where to look. Mac's plan was elegant and incredibly dangerous. PT168 would attack from port side, PT171 from starboard, while we went straight up the middle after the lead transport. It meant passing between escort destroyers, literally threading the needle between death on either side, but if it worked, we'd cause maximum confusion and have clear shots at all 3 transports. "All ahead slow," Mac whispered. We crept forward at 5 knots, barely moving, letting the convoy come to us. At 2,000 yards, we could hear their engines, the deep thrumming of massive diesels pushing thousands of tons through water. At 1,500 yards, we could see individual details, the pagoda-style bridge of the lead destroyer, the cargo booms on the transports, and even figures moving on deck. At 1,000 yards, Mac gave the signal, 3 clicks on the radio, and all 3 PT boats surged forward simultaneously. Our engines roared from idle to full throttle in seconds, lifting our bow out of the water as we accelerated to attack speed. The night shattered as we raced toward the enemy convoy at 40 knots. 3 small craft challenging steel giants. The Japanese were caught completely off guard. Their lookouts, trained to spot submarines or approaching destroyers, never expected attackers moving this fast from this close. We were inside their formation before they could react, racing between escort destroyers at point-blank range. I opened fire with my twin 50s, raking the bridge of the nearest destroyer, seeing my tracers punch through windows and ricochet off steel. Fire 1, Fire 2, Patty launched our first 2 Mark 13s at 600 yards. Impossibly close range where missing was almost impossible. The mechanical fish leapt from their tubes and splashed into water, their propellers already spinning at full speed. Twin wakes of phosphorus and bubbles streaked toward the lead transport, a converted passenger liner carrying over 3,000 Japanese soldiers.
The destroyer to our starboard finally reacted, swinging its searchlight toward us. The brilliant white beam found us instantly, blinding in its intensity. Immediately, their 25mm anti-aircraft guns opened fire, green tracers reaching out for us like deadly fingers. Shells splashed around us, so close that spray soaked everyone on deck. Then our torpedoes hit. The first struck the transport just after the bridge, with a thunderous explosion that lit up the night like lightning. The second hit amidships, breaking the ship's back instantly. The 8,000-ton vessel lifted partially out of the water, then split in half, both sections immediately beginning to sink. Through the searchlight glare and gunfire, we could see hundreds of Japanese soldiers spilling into the water, their screams audible even over our engines. PT168 struck next. Both Mark 13 torpedoes slammed into the second transport. That ship, loaded with ammunition and fuel for the Vela garrison, exploded like a volcano. The blast was so powerful it knocked me off my feet, and a wave of superheated air washed over our boat. Flaming debris rained down around us, starting small fires on our wooden deck that we frantically stamped out. The Japanese destroyers were responding now, but they faced an impossible problem. We were too close for their main guns to depress low enough to hit us, and we were mixed in with their own transports, making it dangerous for them to fire. Their solution was to try ramming us, using their superior size to simply run us down. The nearest destroyer turned hard toward us, its knife bow aimed directly at our beam. At the combined closure speed, we had maybe 10 seconds before impact. Mac threw the wheel hard right and pushed the throttles past their stops. Our engines screamed in protest, but we pivoted like a ballet dancer, missing the destroyer's bow by less than 10 feet. As we passed, I emptied a full belt of ammunition into their bridge at point-blank range, seeing sparks fly as bullets struck home. PT171 wasn't as fortunate. Joey Antonelli had lined up perfect shots on the third transport, but a Japanese destroyer caught them with searchlights before they could fire. The enemy's 25mm cannons found their mark, stitching a line of holes across PT171's bow. One shell hit a torpedo, but miraculously it didn't detonate. The warhead needed to be armed by spinning in water before it would explode. Still, Joey had to abort his attack run and flee, streaming smoke and taking on water. We came around for another pass,
But the element of surprise was gone. Every searchlight in the Japanese convoy was now sweeping the water, and guns of every caliber were firing in all directions. The water around us was torn by so many shell splashes, it looked like a rainstorm. Worse, the Japanese had finally gotten their 5-inch guns into action, and those could blow us to splinters with a single hit. "Launch remaining fish and get us out of here," Max shouted over the din. Patty fired our last 2 Mark 13 torpedoes at the remaining transport, but the ship's captain saw them coming and managed to comb the wakes, turning parallel so both torpedoes passed harmlessly along his sides. Then we were running, all 3 engines at maximum power, weaving between shell splashes as we fled into darkness. Behind us, the battle continued to rage. PT168, despite taking several hits, managed to put 1 more torpedo into the already sinking second transport. The ammunition ship's death throes illuminated the entire strait, secondary explosions rippling through her hull as she went down. 2 of the 3 transports were gone, taking nearly 6,000 Japanese soldiers with them. The 3rd transport and the destroyers were undamaged, but thoroughly shaken. We regrouped 5 miles south of the engagement area, all 3 boats battered but still afloat. PT171 was in worse shape with multiple holes at the waterline and 1 engine out. We came alongside and helped transfer wounded crew members while our carpenter's mates worked frantically to plug holes with everything from mattresses to life jackets. PT168 had lost her radio antenna and taken shrapnel damage throughout her superstructure, but remained combat capable. Our boat had somehow escaped with minimal damage, some shrapnel holes, a burned-out gun barrel from overheating, and scorch marks from near misses. But we were alive, and we'd accomplished our mission. 2 transports definitely sunk, thousands of enemy soldiers killed, and the Japanese reinforcement schedule disrupted. The surviving transport, rather than continue to Vela, reversed course and headed back to Rabaul. The journey back to base was tense. Japanese float planes were up at first light searching for us. We hid in shadows of small islands, camouflaged with palm fronds, engines off, barely breathing as enemy aircraft droned overhead. It took us 14 hours to cover what should have been a 3-hour journey, but we all made it back to Rendova. The debriefing was exhaustive. Intelligence officers wanted every detail. Japanese tactics, weapon effectiveness, enemy response times. What we told them would be distributed to every PT squadron in the Pacific. The lessons learned from our engagement would save American lives and sink enemy ships throughout the remaining war years. But the immediate impact was even more significant. Radio intercepts revealed Japanese communications describing new American secret weapons, high-speed torpedo boats appearing from nowhere. For the first time, the Imperial Navy was afraid of the dark. They could no longer move freely at night, couldn't guarantee safe passage to even their most heavily guarded convoys. Every shadow might hide a PT boat. Every sound might be American engines approaching. Over the following weeks, the Japanese changed their entire resupply strategy. Convoys grew larger but less frequent. Destroyer escorts doubled, then tripled. They started using searchlight-equipped float planes for night reconnaissance. All these changes meant fewer supplies and reinforcements reaching their island garrisons, giving our ground forces crucial advantages. The psychological impact was perhaps even greater than tactical success. Japanese soldiers waiting for reinforcements that never came began to lose hope. Enemy commanders unable to guarantee supply deliveries had to cancel offensive operations. The myth of Japanese invincibility at night, shattered by wooden boats crewed by American teenagers and reservists, began to crumble throughout the Pacific. Our squadron success led to rapid expansion of the PT boat program. New bases were established throughout the Solomons and New Guinea. Improved boats with better engines, radar, and armor protection were rushed into production. Tactics we developed through trial and error became official doctrine taught at training bases from Rhode Island to California. The cost of this success was measured in friends who didn't come home. 2 weeks after our successful attack, PT166 hit a mine while returning from patrol. All hands lost. PT162 was caught by Japanese destroyers in daylight when engine failure left her dead in the water. They shot her to pieces. Only 3 survivors were pulled from the water. Joey Antonelli, skipper of PT171, was killed by a sniper while his boat was refueling at a forward base. By October 1943, when I was rotated back to the States for new construction training, our squadron had lost 7 boats and 73 men. But we'd sunk or damaged over 40 Japanese vessels, from destroyers to barges, and killed thousands of enemy soldiers who never reached their destinations. The exchange rate was brutal, but necessary. Every PT boat we lost was replaceable. The Japanese ships and experienced crews were not. I returned to the Pacific in March 1944 as executive officer of PT321, operating in the Philippines. The boats were better: radar, armor plate around the cockpit, more reliable torpedoes. But the essence remained the same: speed, surprise, and audacity. We were still proving that American innovation could overcome any enemy advantage. The Japanese never fully adapted to the PT boat threat. They tried everything: specialized hunter-killer groups, radar-equipped destroyers, even suicide boats designed to ram us. But they couldn't be everywhere, couldn't protect every convoy, couldn't make the night safe again. The secret weapon they discovered too late had permanently changed the balance of power in the Pacific. Mac McPherson survived the war, earning a Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars. He stayed in the Navy, eventually commanding a destroyer squadron in Korea. We kept in touch until his death in 1987. At his funeral, his son told me Mac often said the PT boats were where he learned what real courage meant. Not the absence of fear, but action despite terror.
Dutch Vanderberg returned to Yale after the war, but never forgot his navigation lessons learned in the Solomons. He became one of America's leading oceanographers, using skills honed dodging Japanese destroyers to map ocean currents and underwater mountains. He once told me that after threading between enemy warships at 40 knots in the dark, everything else seemed easy. Charlie Mendoza went back to building racing engines in Los Angeles, applying tricks learned keeping PT boat engines running to make cars go faster. His garage became legendary among hot rodders, with a sign that read, "Speed Shop, we made PT boats fly." He'd tell customers that if he could make 4,500 horsepower push 50 tons at 45 knots, he could make anything go fast. Patty O'Brien stayed in the Navy, becoming one of the service's leading torpedo experts. He wrote the manual on Mark 13 torpedo maintenance that was used until the 1970s. But he never forgot those torpedoes we fired that night off Vela Lavella. "Those were my fish that sank those transports," he'd say with pride. 2 shots, 2 hits, 6,000 Japanese who never made it to kill Americans. The PT boat story is often overshadowed by bigger battles of World War II, Midway, Guadalcanal, Leyte Gulf. But for those of us who served on these tiny wooden warriors, we knew we'd been part of something revolutionary. We'd proven that technology and courage could overcome tradition and size. We'd shown that American sailors, many of whom had never seen the ocean before Pearl Harbor, could outfight the best Navy in the world at their own game. The secret of our success wasn't really the boats themselves, though they were marvels of engineering. It wasn't our torpedoes, though when they worked, they were devastating. The real secret was the American spirit of innovation, the willingness to try something completely different when conventional methods failed. While our admirals initially dismissed PT boats as toys, junior officers and enlisted men proved that toys with teeth could change the course of a war. Every time I read about modern naval warfare, missile boats, stealth technology, asymmetric warfare, I see the legacy of those PT boats. We proved that naval combat didn't have to be about battleships slugging it out at 20,000 yards. It could be about speed and stealth, about hitting where the enemy didn't expect and disappearing before they could respond. Every fast attack craft in today's Navy carries DNA from those plywood speedboats that terrorized the Japanese Navy. The Japanese phrase that entered their naval vocabulary in 1943 was simply mosquito boat terror, a fear that spread throughout their fleet. Post-war interviews with Japanese naval officers revealed that PT boats caused disruption far beyond our actual numbers. They had to assume we were everywhere, had to plan for attacks that might never come, had to waste resources defending against threats that might be shadows. Admiral Tanaka Raizo, who commanded many of the Tokyo Express runs, wrote after the war, "The American PT boats were our worst nightmare. Submarines we could hunt with depth charges. Aircraft we could see coming. But these devil boats appeared from nowhere, struck like cobras and vanished into the night. They made us afraid of our own element, the darkness we had once ruled."
That fear, that uncertainty we created, was worth more than any number of ships sunk. It represented the turning point when the Imperial Japanese Navy, which had dominated the Pacific since Pearl Harbor, began to doubt itself. When sailors who had trained their entire lives for night combat started fearing shadows, the psychological battle was already won. The technical evolution of PT boats during the war was remarkable. The early boats like ours were essentially peacetime designs pressed into combat service. By 1945, PT boats carried radar, rockets, advanced torpedoes, and even primitive guided missiles, but the core concept never changed. Small, fast, deadly, and crewed by volunteers willing to take insane risks for their country. One story that captures the PT boat spirit happened in October 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. A squadron of PT boats, hopelessly outgunned, attacked the Japanese battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built. Their torpedoes couldn't even penetrate Yamato's armor belt, but they attacked anyway, forcing the massive battleship to take evasive action and buying time for American escort carriers to escape. Small boats didn't sink the giant that day, but their courage saved American lives. The PT boat bases themselves became legends. Rendova, Tulagi, Mios Wendy, exotic names that meant mosquitoes, malaria, and midnight missions. These weren't Pearl Harbor or San Diego with their officers' clubs and clean sheets. These were muddy hellholes where we lived on Spam and cigarettes, where mail took months to arrive, where the only entertainment was poker and rumors. But morale remained high because we knew we were making a difference. The natives of the Solomon Islands deserve special recognition. They risked everything to help us, guiding us through reefs, rescuing downed airmen and shipwrecked sailors, providing intelligence on Japanese movements. Many were executed when caught helping Americans. Their courage and sacrifice were essential to our success. Without their help, we would have been blind and lost in those island mazes. The Coast Watchers, those lonely volunteers hiding on Japanese-occupied islands with radios and binoculars, were our guardian angels. They'd report 40 bombers heading your way, or destroyer squadron moving south at high speed. Many times their warnings saved our bases from surprise attack or helped us position for perfect ambush. We never met most of them, but we owed them our lives. One technological advancement that revolutionized PT boat operations was radar. The first sets were so primitive they could barely distinguish between an island and a ship, but by late 1944, we could track targets in complete darkness and fog. The Japanese, who had relied on superior night vision and training, suddenly found themselves at a disadvantage. We could see them before they could see us, the ultimate advantage in night combat. The evolution of our tactics was constant. We learned to use aluminum foil strips to confuse Japanese radar. We developed wolfpack tactics, coordinating attacks by multiple boats from different directions. We figured out how to use shore batteries as diversions, getting the enemy to reveal their positions by firing at fake targets while we maneuvered for the real attack. The most dangerous missions were the ones nobody heard about: inserting Coast Watchers behind enemy lines, evacuating trapped Marines from surrounded beaches, running ammunition to isolated outposts under enemy fire. These weren't glamorous torpedo attacks, but grinding, dangerous work that saved countless lives. We became the Navy's Swiss Army knife, used for any job too dangerous or too crazy for conventional vessels. Personal relationships on PT boats were unique in the military. On a destroyer with 300 men, you might not know everyone's name. On a PT boat with 12 men, you knew everything. Who snored, who had nightmares, who got seasick, who could be counted on when things went to hell. That intimacy created bonds that lasted lifetimes. My PT boat reunions decades after the war felt like family gatherings because that's what we were, a family forged in combat. The food on PT boats deserves its own mention, or perhaps complaint. We lived on K rations, Spam, powdered eggs, and whatever we could trade from larger ships. Fresh water was precious, rationed for drinking only. We washed in seawater that left salt crystals that chafed and burned. Coffee, black and strong enough to float a winch, was our lifeblood. Some crews became creative, fishing with grenades or trading torpedo alcohol to base personnel for real food. Maintenance was constant and critical. Saltwater corroded everything. Tropical heat rotted wood and fabric, and high-speed operations stressed every component to its limits. We spent more time maintaining our boats than fighting in them. Every man became a mechanic, carpenter, and electrician by necessity. A PT boat with engine failure in enemy waters was a death trap, so we treated maintenance like a religion.
The weather in the Solomons was our constant enemy. Tropical squalls could appear from nowhere, turning calm seas into mountains of water. Lightning strikes could fry our radios and electrical systems. The heat and humidity were so oppressive that men would pass out at their posts. But bad weather was also our friend, hiding us from enemy aircraft and making our small boats harder to spot among the wind-driven waves. Navigation in those waters required skills they never taught at Annapolis. Charts were often wrong based on surveys from the 1800s. Coral reefs could appear overnight after storms. We learned to read watercolor and wave patterns, to smell land before seeing it, to navigate by instinct when instruments failed. Every successful patrol added to our mental maps of those deadly waters. The Japanese response to PT boats evolved throughout the war. They developed special shallow draft destroyers specifically to hunt us. They created coordinated search patterns using float planes and destroyers together. They even tried using captured PT boats as decoys. But for every countermeasure they developed, we developed countermeasures. It became a deadly game of chess, played at 40 knots in the dark. One aspect rarely discussed was the psychological toll. Living constantly on edge, knowing that any patrol could be your last, watching friends die in horrific ways, it marked us all. Some men cracked, requesting transfers even though it meant being labeled cowards. Others became addicted to the adrenaline, volunteering for increasingly dangerous missions. Most of us just endured, finding ways to cope with fear that never really went away. The humor that developed was dark, but necessary. We named our boats things like Sudden Death, Hell's Angels, and Grim Reaper. We made up songs about sinking Japanese ships, the more gruesome the better. It was psychological armor, a way to make the unbearable bearable. The impact of PT boats extended beyond the Pacific. When the Normandy invasion was planned, PT boats were included to protect the fleet from German E-boats. The lessons learned in the Solomons were applied in the Mediterranean, the English Channel, and even the rivers of Europe. American PT boat doctrine influenced naval thinking worldwide, inspiring similar programs in dozens of navies. Looking back now, decades later, I'm amazed we survived. We were mostly kids playing with deadly toys in a war that killed millions. We made mistakes that should have killed us, took risks that make me shudder in retrospect. But we also accomplished something remarkable. We took an untested concept and turned it into a war-winning weapon. We proved that American innovation and courage could overcome any obstacle. The legacy of PT boats lives on in today's Navy. Every fast attack craft, every special operations boat, every vessel designed to strike quickly and disappear carries the DNA of those original mosquito boats. The sailors who crew them probably don't know about nights off Vela Lavella or the terror we brought to Japanese convoys, but their spiritual descendants carrying on the tradition of speed, surprise, and audacity. When people ask me if I'm proud of my service, I tell them about that night of July 20th, 1943. 3 small wooden boats attacked a major enemy convoy and sent thousands of Japanese soldiers to the bottom. We emerged from darkness and disappeared before the enemy could respond. We were America's secret weapon, and we changed the course of the Pacific War. The Japanese were stunned not just by our boats, but by what they represented. American willingness to innovate, to take risks, to challenge conventional wisdom. They had studied our Navy for decades, knew our battleships and carriers, our traditions and tactics, but they never imagined we'd send wooden speedboats armed with torpedoes to challenge their steel warships. That failure of imagination cost them dearly.
In the end, the story of PT boats is a uniquely American story. We took a British concept, powered it with Packard engines designed for aircraft, armed it with torpedoes originally designed for destroyers, and crewed it with civilians who'd never seen the ocean before Pearl Harbor. It shouldn't have worked, but it did, because we made it work through sheer determination and ingenuity. The last operational PT boat was retired in 1959, replaced by newer, faster, more capable vessels. But for those of us who served on them in World War II, they'll always be the boats that helped win the war in the Pacific. We proved that size doesn't determine victory, that courage matters more than armor, and that American sailors in wooden boats could defeat anyone, anywhere, anytime. As I finish this account, sitting in my study, surrounded by faded photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings, I can still hear those Packard engines roaring in the night. I can still feel the splay of Solomon seawater on my face, still smell the cordite and diesel fumes. Most of all, I can still feel the pride of being part of something revolutionary, something that changed naval warfare forever. We were boys who became men in those wooden boats, fighting a war we didn't start but were determined to finish. We attacked from darkness because that's where we were strongest, where our speed and surprise gave us the advantage. The Japanese learned to fear the darkness they once owned, learned that American ingenuity could turn any disadvantage into an advantage. That's the legacy of PT boats. Not just the ships we sank or the battles we won, but the proof that free people fighting for their freedom can overcome any tyranny. We were small, fast, and deadly. We were secret weapons that stayed secret just long enough to turn the tide. We were the mosquito fleet that brought down an empire, one torpedo at a time. The Japanese were stunned by America's PT boats because they represented everything the Imperial Navy hadn't expected from Americans. Innovative thinking, aggressive tactics, and the willingness to risk everything on an unproven concept. By the time they understood the threat we posed, it was too late. The shadows they had once ruled now belonged to us. And from those shadows, we struck without mercy until the rising sun finally set on Japan's Pacific Empire.